Hi, you all. My name is Ayden Carpenter, and I'm an intern at the Center for Research on Vermont. And today I'll be sitting and interviewing Dr. Alexander Yin as part of our ongoing interview series. So, right now, the center is shifting the focus more on people working towards sustainability and diversity in Vermont, working to make that more of Vermont's future. And as such, I'm really excited to have Alex as our guest. Alex is the executive director of institutional research at UVM, as well as sitting on the school board for the Winooski School District and the board of directors at Caminar Latino. And most importantly, he is my dear, dear friend. Alex, thank you so much for joining me. Let's get started. So I guess we're gonna start and chat about you, how you got here. How did you we're from Mass, right?
Well,
No,
I'm
you're from New Hampshire.
from New
You're from New Hampshire. How
State.
did you end up in Vermont?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Aiden, and I'm really glad I get to do this and get a conversation with a good friend like you. I actually didn't come directly from New Hampshire per se, but I was actually at Penn State for the longest time, for 10 years um, at the school, and it was ready for me to move up for a position for me at my career. There was an urge that I felt like, hey, I spent some years in this position. I really wanted to be a leader in my and run my own office of institutional research, which how I like to explain we're like the Moneyball folks, if you like baseball, but we basically help executive administrators make database decision makings with analyzing data, right? And it came to that UVM had a position that was open for it, and I applied, and I was forever grateful that they said yes, because I knew that I was told later on that they had people that had 10 years more experience as candidates, but they saw something special in me. They saw the energy that I love data, but also how to apply it, right? And so they gave me an offer, and I accepted, and I moved to Vermont, thinking oh, this is going to be interesting. This is like coming home to New Hampshire, right? And but I also had to learn to kind of change my mindset about Vermont, because I gotta admit, I know for many of us folks out there in the real world, they basically think Vermont and New Hampshire are the same state, right? We look alike and all that, but we're very, yeah, you're right. In many ways, if I wasn't from New Hampshire, I'd say you're probably right. And there's a little bit of state rivalry going on. In New Hampshire, we say we're pointing right side up, and we don't understand why Vermont's pointing down. We don't understand why Vermont does the thing. So I had to and I remember I remember on my interview when someone asked me, how was your trip up for the interview? And I said, it was great. I got to drive on 89, which starts in New Hampshire, and then ended up in Burlington. And one of the guys who was interviewing me was like, hey, Alex, if you move to Vermont, you need to change your perspective and remember that 89 starts in Vermont and ends in New Hampshire, Concord, and so there's a lot of that adjustment. And that's how I really came to Vermont and as a way. And it was a shock. I'm not gonna lie. I thought like there's not many people of color in New Hampshire, but there were starting to be more because of the way Boston has kind of flowed through. And I legitimately, I think I've told folks that I think I was the only person of color born in New Hampshire in 1979. And I've looked at the census, and I think there's a good chance it's a high probability. And so I thought and it's not like State College, Pennsylvania was very diverse. But I got to admit, I didn't realize that State College also, because of a large institution, was a main draw for a lot of international students that I at least got my food, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Vermont, I was
Yeah.
shocked. And I think this, eating food in this state, which is one of the things that we love and makes it hard. We all know that white people are nice, but they don't know how to cook. Their two seasonings are essentially salt and pepper, right? And I think I struggle looking for food everywhere and trying food here. I finally found some barbecue places that like Mark Barbecue, which is really good. and also pizza places like Barnyard, and I'm happy to see that some of the other new American populations are actually like building their restaurants. So I feel like South Asian food like Everest are like really good, and it's that flavor that I was craving for that wasn't here for the first time. But I feel like I'm getting off topic, like
It's okay.
and stuff.
Well, so you're here. I guess one, you're here. How would you say Vermont's different, really? When you come here, you compare to one where you grew up in New Hampshire to all the other places from being in Georgia to being in Pennsylvania at Penn State, now being here. How are they all different? Where do you see like the differences in diversity?
Well, in terms of percentage wise, it's probably not like the other places that I live in. But I think it's like sometimes the political mindset of like, this ultra white guilt, and also sometimes folks here not moving beyond the black and white dichotomy when it comes to diversity. Like there, like I know I've been on the school board for a while where like I talk about Asian Americans being important because 20% of our school district is Asian Americans, and they want to keep the conversation about anti-racism to be only on blackness, which please note that I'm not saying that that's not important. This is highly important, but you got to be like, if you're going to do an inclusive environment, you got to think about inclusivity from all angles of it, right?
Yeah.
And I got to admit, here's the like a big difference though, is that even though like sometimes it's a narrow definition of diversity, at least Vermont is willing to allow people sometimes in this area, Winooski, Burlington, is allow community members to be on the school board and be leaders. They have doubts, and I'm thinking about like when I ran and all the things. Like one of the things I think you've heard this, right? Like you're not a true Vermonter until you're like 7 generations here, and they're like just think that as if that's as a skill set that needs to be done, right? And you go like, really, like 7 like no other state, right? And I've actually said to some folks is that like that's kind of a little bit of a, it's actually anti-Vermont, and it's actually a little bit anti-racist because you're like you're basically telling all the people of color, and also like you're owning land that isn't yours potentially if you think about our indigenous people, right? That you're not actually being a Vermonter, because when I think of Vermonters, it's about inclusivity, about social justice, it's about sustainability, it's about loving the land, like right. And if you put that broader definition, there's a lot more welcoming of people to be here in Vermont when you're asking people to stay in this state, right? But as soon as you say you're not a true Vermonter because you haven't been 4 generations,
Yeah.
why, right? And you've noticed, I know we've talked about, I've been fighting on some legislation on making educational equity, but in doing my introductions, and this was a transformation for me, I had to embrace my inner Vermonter.
Yeah.
And I had to say, hey, I speak to you as a fellow Vermonter. Now, I knew that blew some minds out. Because they're trying to figure out how many generations I was here. Like, wait, right? But I said that to be an opening to say, hey, I'm not here to just be someone that's going to try to make changes and then leave. I actually want to be invested in this community and really embrace the true values of Vermont, right? Yeah. And I think, and like we've had conversations about this. I know that you're a college and you're from DC, right? And we still use the us and them, and I use that. I was like, us New Hampshireites would never do that, right? But I had to tone that down a little bit because I'm like, I'm not living in New Hampshire. I'm living in Vermont now, and I want to be, and I think there's a lot of pieces in this community that are good, and I'm hoping that I can help you so that like when you graduate here, hey, I still want you to stay in Vermont after you graduate. Now, I'll work every hard. Like I got 3 more years, 3.5 years to recruit you to stay in Vermont, right? But also say that it's all right. But if you don't, at least you bring a little Vermont with you, and maybe in the future you'll remember and want to come back, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it speaks to like that wider idea of diversity and what diversity is useful for. It's not to say like, hey, we want this person here just to like be there. We want them there to have their perspective and share perspective, not only their perspective with us, but also our perspective with them. And I think it's important, like a lot of the work you're doing in terms of making these people feel more comfortable, like the people who are commonly in like this other category, and making them feel more comfortable so they share their perspective, their worldview, so they can stay here. Because what are the percentages in Vermont? Just very, very low levels of diversity. And it's important to get new people here because that's how you get new ideas in the state.
And I think what you bring up as a point here is one of those philosophical changes that I need us to start seeing, is that we need to start seeing that everybody has an asset and a strength that can contribute to the community, right?
Yes.
And I work with a lot of students, like when I work on the school board with Winooski in many ways, is like, when they're joined, like I worked with a student who joined our charter commission, right? He was he was a new American that like came over to this country in 8th grade, and he was taking the chance to be on this committee. And of course, a lot of people would see 17-year-old.
Yes.
I saw who his name was Hussein Omar. I saw him as an intelligent person. Yes, he was youthful, but that youth was bringing something that none of us all had, none of an experience, and he was trying to make our community better. And so I reached out to him because I know that it's tough to speak out to a bunch of, sometimes it's hard to speak out to a bunch of old people, right? And wondering, is my voice matter? And sometimes there are disagreements. And I had to tell them, like, yeah, there's going to be people that disagree, but don't be afraid to share your thoughts. And one of the big conclusions of this is that his involvement actually helped change the charter of Winooski so that all residents are now going to vote on March 1st, 2022. Right? He
Yes.
was a contributing member of this committee that made Winooski better. And he can see, and even though sadly I didn't recruit him to UVM, he's at Washington University, he knows his home is here and he wants to come back here because he knows what he can do and he knows that he's a Vermonter, right? And I think that's the beauty of diversity. Like, if I ask you this question, Ayden, what has diversity done for you? How would you answer that question?
It's given me a lot of different perspectives to think about life from. Like our conversations. I am not like an Asian man. You're like middle aged around. I hope
Mhm.
less than middle age. We want you to get past more than double. Less than middle aged. But our perspectives in life are very different. And I think that goes for so many other people. Like, I have never sat there and been like, oh, I want to go like surfing. But being able to go sit and talk with the people who have been surfing, and like I understand why they do it and what makes it fun for them, and understand like, hey, that relates to me and why I bike so much. That relates to me and why I rock climb so much. Like,
Mhm.
what diversity does is share perspectives and ideas that you yourself wouldn't be able to come up with, because like the more, it's like the classic like groupthink type of thing where like the more heads you have attacking
Mhm.
a problem from different directions, the better solution you're going to find, because it filters through so many different people.
And what I often say is like diversity is about first finding the commonality so that we can appreciate the differences.
Yeah.
And I know that in our conversations, like, yes, we have different perspectives and different ways and paths on how we do things, but it's the values that you and I have come to like it's kind of amazing, right? Like, you're 19, I'm 42, turning 43 this year, but our values are very similar, and we've come to them in different paths, but that's what gets us to have these type of conversations. And then figuring out, like, how do you feel more welcome to stay in Vermont? Because it is hard.
Yeah.
I'm not telling, I mean, like, it was hard to sit through school board meetings and have white folks tell me that essentially that anti-racism should only be about anti-blackness because our whole history in U.S. history was how we treated, blacks. And I'm going like, yeah, our whole country has been bad about all immigration, anybody who's been doing it, including it. And once again, I'm very supportive of all and trying to be a good
Yeah.
ally, right? But I also can't not let you misunderstand and not understand American history to understand the contributions of Asian Americans in the strengthening of some of the values of this country, right? And and it was weird because a week later, the Atlanta shootings happening, and these same white people are calling me, and I'm going like, why does it have to be a tragic event before you call me and make me feel welcome in the community? Because that goes back again is that like you're trying to do me a favor, right? The one thing that I've learned about people of color is we're resilient, right? We're resilient. We know how to survive. What we need is like white people stop doing stupid stuff sometimes, right? Stop calling us the racist things, right? Stop destroying, tearing down the Black Lives Matter flag, right? And put it into the perspective of empathy. And that's what diversity has done for me, was because in interacting with the wide range of people that I'm in, I develop a better sense of compassion and empathy. And I've learned,
Mm.
I never told you the story about Caminar Latino, where it was like essentially I started off as a volunteer working in a domestic violence a prevention kind of group, and I was working with the children. And I had this epiphany because they were so grateful because I was a volunteer, right? And it was at that point, there was one night where I was working with newborns. And I was holding a newborn, probably like 6 months. And it was hungry, it was hot, but it was suckling on my t-shirt. And and in that, I was like thinking about the lesson that I learned from this kid about unconditional love and trust with me at such a young age. And then I was going like, wait a second. They're saying that I'm a volunteer, which is actually a power privilege kind of word. And I'm going like, but I'm learning so much more from them. Unconditional love, trust, grit, because what they were going through and what they were hiding and what they were trying to do with what was going on in their family, yet they were still happy and curious about me and welcoming me into the community. That I started to stop using the word volunteer because I couldn't understand what was I volunteering when I was gaining as much from them as they were gaining from me. And that's why I started working on words like I was a community member with Caminar Latino.
Mm.
Right? And those were like just powerful lessons that have shaped me as a person and how I think about how my life choices are, you know, and the work that we do. And that's what diversity has done for me and stuff.
Okay. Then I guess to transition, how are you trying to really advocate for diversity in the Winooski School District? Because you're sitting on the school board, you have like some position of power, and I know this is something that genuinely means a lot to you, and diversity's done so much for you. So what is diversity doing for the students?
So for me, I actually joined the school board because back when I was in Penn State, I would join things like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and like they would be grateful how great of a mentor I was to the children, but they never asked me to be on the board, which baffled me
Mm.
because I was a person of color. I mean, you said it. I have a doctorate in education and assessment and all these wonderful things. Yet they never saw me as a leader to be on a board to contribute on those things. So when I came to like Vermont, I said one of the things I'm going to try not to do this time, even though I love mentoring students, is I'm not going to mentor students because I'm going to try to get on the board so that they can see and take that knowledge.
Mm.
And when the school board came, there was a position that opened up because someone stepped down. And then I looked at the board and go like, they keep on telling me that like we're the most diverse school district, but our school board is all white. I said, I'm going to step up and like apply and share all that knowledge and share access and, all those things. And, and I did. And representation does matter. And I know this because in some ways, some of these students will see me as a leader. Maybe they not all relate, but I did mention that 20%. And it really hit home to me one day when I was coming out of the school, and one of the young students who was in third or fifth grade at one moment said, hey, I noticed that the legislators were at the school yesterday. Are you a legislator? Because that's really cool. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I'm only a school board member. No one knows what a school board member at third grade is. But I told him one day, I was like, maybe I'll run for governor. And you could see the eyes light up in his face. He goes like, I will vote for you. or no, like you're Asian, right? Like because, and then he goes on like, well, I can't vote, but I'll tell my parents to vote for you, right, and all that. And I think so. First, the representation is so important because now these students can see that they can be part of the system, where they can be part of change because there are people that look like them that are trying to change the system,
Yeah.
right? But then I'm also constantly talking about the importance of diversity and advocating for the school. Like, so one of the first things that I did was like help us advocate for a new bond for our city to update our school because I'm like it's unethical for our students of color to be in a school space that's only meant for 600 students, but there's 800 of us in there.
Yeah.
Right? It's unethical that our boiler is from the 1950s, and the only way to replace it was for us to like eBay the parts, right? But
Oh,
now
yeah.
we need to adopt it because we also know that like learning isn't just the constant of a teacher sitting in front of a classroom and giving knowledge. Environment has an impact. We also
Yes.
knew one of the more creative things that our school district does, and I'm really proud of this, is that we also have healthcare within our school districts because we know that our parents can't necessarily afford to take time off to take their kids. Because we also know that health is important in learning and all that. And so we're equalizing these opportunities to do it, right?
Mm.
But I also make sure that I work with the students and say, and I think to build them up because I went and watched their presentations in proficiency based education, and I'm going like, and I asked tough questions, like and what amazed me about the students were they said like, hey, you asked really good questions. How do I get to that? They weren't upset at me for asking tough questions. They were happy that I was challenging to think. So I was setting high expectations for them too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I was believing in them. And I actually also said like the data points that I looked at, I got scared when I'm looking at the data that says that like our students didn't feel like they were being cared about in our community. And that's the
Mm.
data point that I want because if we care about our students who are growing up in this environment, then they're more likely to stay in this community and be part of it. Right?
Yes.
Because if you can't keep the people that are already staying here and living here, what chances do we have to actually recruit others to come into the state? Right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, it's not like I agree on every spectrum with the students on everything, right? And I don't want that, as you said, that's opposite of diversity, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I am working with them and saying, I hear you, and like let's work and see if we can critically, and maybe sometimes we just disagree, but we learn how to disagree in a respectful way and have those type of tough conversations. And that's why I still get a lot of students kind of meeting up with me, right, and chat with me and ask these deeper questions, like but it's hard because like I'm driving up to Fairfax to meet up with an Asian American student because there's no other role models. And by the way, man, it's hard to eat food up past Milton. There's like nothing. Find a restaurant.
You know, Vermont's a very quiet place.
It
Quiet
is,
place.
but I'm also grateful for all the new Americans that take a chance to promote their culture through food and dance.
Definitely.
Right, like Morning Light Bakery. I'm just gonna start like Cafe Dim Sum, even Jin's. Right, like I'm gonna Fo Dang, Fo Han. Like, thank you for making this place a little bit at home, and I'm hoping that people in this community will try to eat their food, but without also trying to make it whiteified either. Right, like
Yeah.
like I have a great appreciation for Chinese American food, but like General Chow's chicken and like orange chicken and sesame, but that's not Chinese food, right?
No.
So you can see I'm getting excited when we talk about food.
Well, I'm sorry to turn away from food, but I guess I want to ask, what is your big project right now? Whether it be like at the school board and the wider community, just what are you working on?
So we passed the bond vote, and now I'm building
Yes.
that school, and hopefully we build that school by the fall of 2023. Sorry, 2022. The hard part is COVID threw a wrinkle because we were actually supposed to be done this past January. So keeping the faith and keeping track and making sure that we're not overrun, because it's hard on our community. We're not the richest community that could afford a school like that. And so it means creativity and like thinking about how to use that money wisely, right? Like I'm a fiscal conservative, but that doesn't mean that means spending the lowest amount of money. It's about investing in a way that will save money in the long run, being strategic in the investment. I think that's what is weird about how people see what it means to be fiscal conservative, right? So I'm hoping that school gets built. And then the other big one is that, like, I also did not realize, like, when I joined the school board, I thought like it'd be like about saving the art program because we weren't going to build a new football stadium. Legitly, Ayden, that's what I thought it was about, right? I did not realize that, like, I was making budget decisions based on like, building that doesn't have leaks in the roof, school busing in the cold.
Mm,
These are like basic needs that, like, I'm going like, I have these. Why are we arguing about this? And then I find out that it's based on because of how Vermont does their education funding formula.
mm,
That wasn't an equitable thing. And basically, I learned that back in 1997, and the legislators will admit this, that they came up with some weights on the back end of a napkin that was based off of what was happening in Maine, but they never readjusted it. And so in the past 2 years, after the legislators commissioned a study from UVM and Rutgers to look at the weights, and they realized that the weights were inequitable.
Can we talk about what the weights are first? Let's clarify that.
So the notion of the weights is the notion that it doesn't, the amount to educate, not all students are created equal, so that it is not an equal amount of money. So it costs more to educate a high school student than it does a third grader.
Yes.
It costs a little bit more money to educate a English language learner or a multi-language learner, not because they're not, able. It's mainly because, you have to adjust the language and stuff. There's a lot more support services, like things that you and I take for granted. Like, we all want our parents to be involved in our education. So, but if our students are coming from countries where they're new Americans, they may not know the language, so that you have to translate materials. You have to hire translators, help them out with those things, right? Those are additional. It's necessary if we want to embrace the diamonds that they all are to be, right?
Yes.
And that's what weights do, is it just announces basically that certain characteristics cost more to educate. Nothing hard. That's what equity is. It's not equality, it's equity, right? And thank you for making sure that I explained that. But in 2019, they basically, legislators are like, there's something wrong with this. And they hired researchers to look at it, and they said, and the researchers came back and they said, yes, there is wrong. You should update the weights. And our legislators weren't going to do it. And so I joined a Coalition for Vermont Student Equity, and it was a combination of a lot of school boards together to fight this, to say, hey, you need to change, and you need to take the recommendations to give the communities a chance to actually have the mechanisms to educate their students properly. And I think as of February 16th, I think we're headed in the right direction, but it's been a long road in fighting and in sharing and interpreting and helping people understand these issues. And I think if you ask why am I so exhausted, you can probably tell, folks, that I haven't had a haircut in a while. I need a haircut. It's because I just haven't had time to go get a haircut. Sound like an old man now.
It's okay. It's okay, Alex.
Ask a question before I go totally off topic, Ayden.
Oh man. Well, no, I mean, thank you. So, in terms of like advocating, what are you really trying to see there in terms of the change?
I think the change there is so that our school district don't feel so bad about choosing things as basic necessities. School bus, building leaking, right? It's providing the resources so that we can actually encompass and give the power to the school local control, because in some the other mechanisms that they were going is that legislators would determine how much money we would get for our English language learners. And I'm going like, that's not local control. I can't hold the legislator accountable, but I can hold the school board member accountable for what budgets they make.
Yeah.
As a local. And I think having that flexibility, we can actually now really put the resources and think strategically in a way that will help all of our students to get to the outcomes that we all want and what they want, you know, what students want and what they were, out of high school to a certain degree. Right? And I really do believe that that will lift some things and actually create a little bit more equity in Vermont. And actually, and I'll tell you this, Ayden, when this bill first came out and the school boards wanted to build this coalition, I said, I'll join in because this is about uniting the rural students who are also have similar needs but different, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It will unite the rural with the urban. It will not pit us together. We will come together as one, as students and come and make a better and stronger Vermont. My goal was not to make a better Winooski, right? It was to make a better Vermont because Winooski will be able to contribute and be better part of that, right? And equity is about that. So that is one of the stronger messages that I've been emphasizing, like in this work that we do, because I'm just as concerned about our rural communities. And I think in some ways, the 1997 weights has hurt in a very detrimental way our rural communities, which is also a very big essence of Vermont.
Yeah. Fair.
Well,
I guess as like a big concluding question for you, as you sit here and think about all the many things you're doing to promote diversity and equity in both Winooski, Burlington, and wider Vermont, what's your big dreams for the future of this state?
My big dream is for us to really truly embrace all forms of diversity and understand it from an asset-based approach. And what I mean by asset, the other counter thought is deficit. It's basically, hey, what I call the blindside moment. Hey, we need to help the people of color move forward, right? And blindside is from that movie where it's a white person seen as a savior. We don't need white saviors. True diversity is us looking at each other as equals in a way that appreciates each other's strengths to make the state great, right? And it is only then and that we stop putting labels on certain things. We still recognize, and this is one that I want to make sure, oftentimes people misconstrue. I have a dream speech from MLK about it's only about character. I'm going no, for a lot of us people of color, our culture is so important to our identity and to the contribution of color. So please recognize my, culture, just like I will recognize your culture. Hence, I'm a blue ribbon square dancer. Right? Understand that we're all at that point that we can contribute, but also, help each other. But look at it from strengths. One of the things that I like working with you about is I constantly promote your strengths, right? So that can keep you, right? In Vermont, and so people can recognize your talent, right? And then when you see talented folks like people of color, don't be afraid to ask them to join their boards. Invite them in. Don't make us work so hard to find these opportunities. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Once again, Alex, thank you so much for joining me. It was wonderful talking with you as always. To the audience, thank you all for joining us for our conversation. I hope you enjoyed listening to Alex. And next week at 12, Wednesday at 12, we'll be talking to Kelly McDowell. She is a hemp consultant. Really excited to chat about why hemp is the future of Vermont agriculture. See you all next week. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Ayden.